Top of next hour. Stop waiting to see what happens when life gets back to normal. Take control of your future now. Go to mycomputercareer.edu. Take free career evaluations today. Live online classes meet just twice a week. Not rocket science. It's mycomputercareer.edu. So there has always been this sense that, you can get a running back anywhere in the draft, which is not true. The great running backs like Ezekiel Elliott or Adrian Peterson, the Barry Sanders, they're not available anywhere in the draft. Like any business in life, there's very little great. And occasionally, you're not going to get Ezekiel Elliott in the third, fourth, fifth round. You can mostly fill your spots in the second round on. Wide receiver, we believe, well, that's different. Wide receiver is different. Wide receiver, hey, you can get wide receiver. Listen to this. If you don't think wide receivers like running back, which is mostly, you can get them everywhere. Since 2015, I'm going to count the wide receivers that have been drafted in the first round. 6, 10, 13, 15, 18. One is a true number one receiver, Amari Cooper. And half of you don't love him. Half of you think he's a 2. He's a 1. There you go. 1 has worked as a number 1. Several busts, a lot of injuries, massive underachieving. Belichick, by the way, can't figure out wide receiver. It's hard. And I think here's the reason. Wide receiver is so dependent on 2 things. Your head coach's ability with the offensive coordinator to scheme you open. Very few Calvin Johnsons who just can catch anything, anywhere. Very few Randy Mosses can get open against any defense. So your head coach and your offensive coordinator, do they have an ability to scheme you open? Secondly, does your quarterback, I think this is big, is he an accurate thrower of the football who can buy time? It's obviously much harder to cover a wide receiver for 5 seconds than it is 2.5. You'd say, well, Tom Brady should make them all work. He doesn't. Tom Brady's an accuracy guy. He's the GOAT, but he's often impatient with young receivers. Aaron Rodgers hasn't had a lot of wide receivers that hit with him. He is demanding. Aaron Rodgers can get impatient, like Brady. Here's the system. You figure it out. I'm not babysitting. Look at the teams that draft wide receivers well, and you see a pattern. San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan has done a pretty good job with his wide receiver picks. So has Andy Reid. Why? Because Shanahan and Andy Reid have the ability to scheme players open. Tight ends. And, George Kittle went 5th round, right, from Iowa. Have you ever noticed watching San Francisco how often George Kittle is still wide open? You ever notice watching the Chiefs, Travis Kelce is often wide open? That's scheming, not just player. In fact, I would say that's mostly scheming. So Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan have an ability to scheme players open. That's why they have a higher hit rate right now in their current jobs with wide receivers and tight ends. I'll give you another example. Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson. Now, they've been in the NFL longer than Lamar, so let's count. They've got more games and more reps, right? They are great ad-libbers. So Houston and Seattle have also done pretty well getting wide receivers and having them hit because Russell runs around. Nobody can reasonably cover a Doug Baldwin, a Lockett, a DK Metcalf. Can't cover him for 7 seconds. Deshaun Watson, similarly. Most of the receivers they draft in Houston work. So it's not who your head coach is, who your quarterback is, goes a long way in the wide receiver drafting department and tight end. Should be noted, Michael Thomas played at Ohio State. He's now a better pro with Drew Brees and Sean Payton. And that's not a knock on Urban Meyer, but it shows you that, and by the way, Peyton doesn't even draft a lot of wide receivers. They don't. They tend to go around the league, find guys they think can fit with them. But here was Urban Meyer talking about Michael Thomas, who got to the NFL. He got the right coach, the right schemes, the right quarterback. Now he's unstoppable.
The name that comes to my mind is Mike Thomas. He didn't work real hard. he was an excuse maker. We kind of sat him down and had a hard conversation, and then he went on to be the highest paid NFL receiver. If you'd have told us that 5-6 years ago, no chance. So I think he's in a great organization. He's got an excellent coaching staff surrounded by elite people, and he's getting better and better. And he'll be one to tell you Drew Brees is a big part of that as well.
Yeah. You know what this makes me think of is there are receivers in this league who take Odell Beckham Jr., who he's dealt with multiple coaches in dysfunction in New York and an old Eli, and multiple coaches in Cleveland and a too young Baker yet, and he's still productive. How do you think Odell Beckham would be with Sean Payton or Andy Reid? And I think that's where Odell Beckham has a right to be frustrated. So much of this league, not just quarterbacks, is where you land. I tell broadcasters this all the time. Listen, man, moving and mobility is great. Just pick the right spot. Because you can end up with a bad boss. There's a sea of money, right? In broadcasting media, there's not a lot of great bosses. Pick the right bosses. Okay? So it's the same thing with pro athletes. Odell Beckham has had an old Eli, an immature Baker to this point. I've lost track. 4 total head coaches, none have worked. What would Odell Beckham be with Andy Reid? What would Odell Beckham be with Kyle Shanahan? What would Odell Beckham be? His numbers might take, today Odell Beckham's not a Hall of Famer. If he had Andy Reid, Kyle Shanahan, or Sean Payton today, we'd be saying he's probably already in. I mean, that's how much it matters. So that's why wide receivers are hard to draft. They're so tied to the coordinator, the head coach, and the quarterback. Bill Simmons around the corner, and oh my Lord, they found an old script. It's the greatest. You want to see this next.